Step into the Mediterranean haven of Malta. Crystal clear waters, ancient ruins, and towering cliffs. The iGaming industry is converging in Malta to take on everything from green courses, the hottest tournament tables, courts, lanes, and of course, the UNESCO city of Valletta for iGaming Next 2023. A week-long festival experience rounding up with the biggest high-end European pool party, Showers, celebrating its 10-year anniversary. Join over 4,000 senior delegates and top affiliates from all around the world alongside industry giants for an unforgettable iGaming festival week. iGaming Next 2023. Contact our sales team for sponsorship opportunities.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of iGaming Next Weekly News Live. Massive shout out to Playson right at the top of the pod there for putting everybody in a good mood with their amazing choice of ad music. And also, Connor, the Valletta advert before that has got me feeling pretty excited about that event now, which is just 20 days away and creeping up on us fast. Are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, absolutely. A chance for us to get together, you and myself and the rest of the team. And hopefully we'll see the likes of Bogdan, who says hello, and Elizabeth, of course, our producer in the comments there. We'll hopefully get together with some of our regular viewers when we're out there as well. But yes, something to look forward to there, something for everyone going on that week.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's usually a good show, and the agenda is shaping up nicely again this year. There are tickets available on our website, so if you don't have one, please do cop one before they all sell out. It would be great to see you at the event and catch up at the networking as well. Like Connor said, we work in the UK, but we work pretty far apart from each other, so it always gives us a nice excuse to socialise and have a beer and everything else. And yeah, hopefully we can do that with some of you in the chat, including Gareth.
Yeah, that's I hardly know her. Very good, nice one.
So, to be honest with you, it's not the busiest of news weeks like it was a couple of weeks ago, where we could barely fit every topic into the running order. But there are quite a lot of interesting developments bubbling away that we can do a bit more of a deep dive on, Connor. So, on our agenda, we've got France looking to legalise online casino. We've got the sort of rumbling dispute between Malta and other European countries with regards to player reimbursement cases. And we're also going to talk about Entain and its historical Turkey business and HMRC probing that particular department. But before we jump into those, I think, firstly, we should, acknowledge the fact that Nico is not with us this week. So it's just the two of us. His absence will be felt by us, and I'm sure by our viewers, which sadly means no 10 in 5. But it does mean Connor steps into the spotlight, as we're going to do something a bit different for you this week. And I'll let Connor introduce it.
Yeah, well, before we do, Jake, I think you've missed out right at the top of the bill, the top story of the week. iGaming Next editor Connor Mulhare receives the sharpest haircut ever seen in history. Your silence on that topic has been deafening, Jake.
Yeah, haircuts are a sore subject for me, Connor. You know that, so I don't tend to engage.
Yeah, thanks for not even mentioning it. But never mind. Yes, indeed, we have had a few pretty big moves in the industry when it comes to some of the key executives and people in the industry this week. The people moves have been coming in thick and fast. So we've got 4 kind of reasonably big stories here. First up, Richard Brown Texture like sun? No, that's something else. Richard Brown, the CEO of Gaming Innovation Group, GIG, is set to stand down from his role by the end of 2023. Richard has been the CEO of that business since 2019, after he originally joined in 2016. And he's now going to stand down at the end of this year, following on from the strategic review at GIG, which has seen it plan to divide into its two separate divisions. So they're going to be, it's going to divide itself into two separate companies, one of which being GIG Media and the other being the platform and sportsbook division. So throughout that process, Richard's going to stay on to provide some continuity for the business. But yes, GIG has begun the search for a new CEO of its sportsbook and platform division. So at the end of this year, Richard Brown will be standing down. Next up, we have Rank Interactive, whose CFO, Janice Duncan, has announced this week is standing down as well. She's leaving the business after about 2.5 years running the online segment's finances. She's going to become CFO now for Casumo instead. She's joining Casumo's relatively new CEO, Francesco Postiglione, if I can pronounce that correctly. I hope I've done it justice. He joined the business in March as the CEO, so there's a bit of a new look management team shaping up now at Casumo, and obviously Janice Duncan is going to play a significant role in that by looking after the operator's finances. Third, a story that we've just put out today is all about Esports Entertainment Group. They've been quietly working away for the last few months. It seemed there was one story after another about EEG not long ago. They kind of came into some financial difficulties, and some significant changes in their management team took place as well. So Damien Matthews was formerly both CFO and Chief Operating Officer, COO, of the business, but he resigned in December 2022 from both of those roles. Even though he resigned, he did remain on the company's board of directors, and he is now set to return as COO only. So someone else is going to take over the CFO position. But Damien Matthews is back as Chief Operating Officer. That comes after Esports Entertainment brought in a new CEO, which was Alex Eagleman, or Eigelman, I'm not sure, pardon me. And he is said to have spearheaded a restructuring effort, which involved a reduction of around 37% of Esports Entertainment's headcount, as well as additional cost-cutting measures to try and sort of save the business from the financial dire straits that it found itself in not too long ago. So in relation to that, Damien Matthews, who's now set to return, said he's seen a dramatic turnaround in the business, and therefore he's agreed to return as COO. And the final people story we have comes from Sweden and the Swedish Gambling Authority, or indeed Spelinspektionen, which I'm only guessing at the pronunciation of once again. How many languages can I butcher today? That's 3 already. So Camilla Rosenberg, the Director General of the Swedish Gambling Authority, has agreed to stay on in that role until 2026, at least. So she, of course, has been the head of the regulator since 2017. She originally joined in 2015 and kind of climbed up the ranks to become the big boss. And obviously that's going to provide some continuity to Sweden's gambling sector and to the regulator itself. So there you go. Much easier than 10 in 5. I reckon I've just about managed 4 in 5. Thanks, Phil, for saying it's like a real-life Duolingo demonstration. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I actually do have a degree in foreign languages, believe it or not.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you smashed it, Connor. Well done. Keeping us up to date with the revolving doors of the iGaming industry there. And yeah, I mean, this week, like every week, a bit of a sort of managerial merry-go-round. That maybe we'll do that again next week. We'll see what Nico's up to. But I'd like to say hello to a few people in the chat who have joined us since the beginning, to Dolce and to Susanna, to Anshu and to Lars, another regular listener, and also to Phil, who I'm actually very glad has joined us at this point, because I'm sure he'll have some thoughts on our first main story of the day, which we actually published last Friday, so you might have missed it. But basically, it's the news that Malta and the MGA and Maltese politicians have moved to introduce a law that would basically protect MGA licensed operators from these player reimbursement prosecution cases that keep popping up from other European countries. The good thing about this stream, guys, is that we'll flash up a little QR code, which means that you can scan that and go to the story and kind of read along as we're discussing in sort of a karaoke format, if you like. But yeah, so basically, despite foreign court orders instructing them to do so, we know that some multi-licensed operators like 888 and Flutter and a few others have been refusing to refund players in these historical claims. And Malta is sort of stepping in to add a bit of governmental precedence to this movement with a new law, which is known as Bill 55, that is currently undergoing parliamentary process. And basically in this bill, Connor, it says that a principle of public policy that no action can be taken against a license holder in relation to the provision or receipt of gaming services if such action contradicts or undermines the legality of gaming services provided in or from Malta under a valid license issued by the MGA. Now, that sounds complicated, but basically the long and short of it is, it says, furthermore, the court will be required to reject the recognition and enforcement of any foreign judgment related to an action described in this particular provision. So that's the part that brings us back to these player reimbursement cases. Colin, me and you are obviously familiar with these player reimbursement cases, but there might be some people watching that are thinking, what are these guys talking about? So just to put it in simple terms, basically, if you were a gambler in, Austria is one of the countries, or Germany before it was properly regulated, and you lost a lot of money in gambling, there's a big business now in basically being able to claim back those losses, basically under the premise that you weren't gambling with regulated services. And this has become pretty massive business for some of these law firms who have kind of set up, purely with the intention of processing these historical loss cases from players in exchange for a cut of the settlements or the returned player losses, which can be agreed kind of in or outside of court. So it's a super lucrative business model. And some of the operators in question have been keen to point that out, that might be the primary reason for some lawyers pursuing these cases. But it's quite a messy situation, and I think the stance that Malta has taken has put the cat amongst the pigeons slightly, and has drawn a lot of criticism from other European countries where these player claims stem from, basically. So Germany and Austria. Now, I can talk some more about this, but I just want to bring in Phil's comment from the chat as well. He says, it's an amazing idea that's super questionable ethically. This blocks a lot of claims that are legitimate. It goes against the EU as a whole, but for gaming, it's kind of needed as we get a lot of fraudulent claims. In Germany now, they have lawyers advertising on TV to claim back losses. It's to stop the scams involved. I'm in favour, but only just, as it could be abused. So that's an interesting stance there, especially, with the TV advert point. It kind of brings up pictures of Better Call Saul, doesn't it? Or some sort of, were you injured at work previously kind of commercials that we used to see 15 years ago on TV. Only now it's related to the gambling industry. But yeah, so I mean, that's the stance of Malta, and it's looking to protect its MGA licensed operators by making this impossible to enforce. But Connor, I think you've got some some sort of arguments from the other side, and from some of the lawyers that are involved in these sorts of cases at the moment, that have taken issue a little bit with how Malta's conducted itself in this situation.
Yeah, there's some commentary we've got from Dr. Benedict Quarch, who is a lawyer from Germany, I believe, and he's the co-founder of Right Now, which is a legal tech company, and I think it's one of those companies that's processing a higher volume of these claims in Germany. He has suggested that the total value of these claims reaches a substantial amount, to say the least, amounting to sort of 100 million euros plus. So it's pretty big business for those people trying to reclaim the funds, and obviously a massive threat to some of those Maltese licensees. He pointed out something about the German regulator GGL, that it did not issue permits to Crosssell licensed operators, quite intentionally, because judgments couldn't be enforced against those operators. And so that I suppose the implication there is that Malta licensed operators are permitted because there's a precedent there that would allow these kind of claims to be processed. But in any case, he said that Malta is in a tricky situation here. He said if the law is passed, Malta would most likely have the EU as an opponent, which of course is not. It's a bit of a David and Goliath situation, legally speaking. They don't want to be in that position. Whereas if the law is withdrawn, then it would be an admission that it is not correct. So it's a bit of a rock and a hard place, seeing what's going to happen with this law. But he also suggested that that even the process of kind of putting this law forward and seeing whether it gets through, and the kind of delays that are likely to come with that, could work in Malta's favour. He said the Maltese government should be well aware that it is not compatible with European law. However, what they gain from it is time. It can easily take 18 months or even 3 years for the European Court of Justice to make a decision on a law like this. And that is certainly a long time during which assets can be moved. So in any case, he's kind of suggesting there, I suppose, that the law is being introduced just as a bit of a delay tactic. Exactly. Snap. Jinx. Yeah.
I think
got from Quarch.
Yeah, and I think what one of the Austrian lawyers, it might have been him actually, suggested that Malta had moved to blatantly undermine European rule of law by blocking the fundamental rights of EU citizens and residents. And this is an important comment, because the operators we've spoken to have kind of been at pains to point out that Austria itself, where there is currently a state-sanctioned gambling monopoly, I mean, they've argued that structure and setup is itself contrary to the EU market freedoms and should not be applied due to the principle of supremacy of European law. So, yeah, I think operators and their opponents are kind of butting heads on this issue. And it's likely to rumble on, as you say, with the delays and potential appeals and legalities of it and everything else. But I guess the overriding question at the end of this, and one that Phil might be able to answer, is what are the advantages now of using an MGA license? Obviously, they've tried to put this law in place so that they've got an amazing string to add to their bow, and that operators can't be prosecuted by these player claims. But I think there's a feeling that they need to do something to make the licensing regime attractive again. I think the one leading Malta-based CEO recently said that something like 90% of MGA revenue had disappeared over the last sort of 5 years or so. And it's a very different marketplace now to it was then. So, yeah, I think there's a wider question here about the future of the MGA license, that Phil is kind of halfway to answering there in the comments. Hello to Nassif, by the way, who joins us from Africa. Awesome to have people from all over the globe tuning in to watch us on a Thursday afternoon, Connor.
Absolutely, yes. Well, Jake, as you know, I am not exactly the finest legal mind of my generation. I don't know how much more I can add on this Malta question.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Should we move on then?
Bogdan asks if Malta will become the next Curacao in terms of the way that it sets up its licensing. Well, let's wait and see. I suppose we'll be following this story quite closely as it develops.
Yeah, I think both the Maltese and the Curacao regulator will be at our show in Valletta, so they could put their cases forward then. I suppose something to look out for. Are you going to have a stab at Kenyan, Connor?
I'm pretty sure they speak English in Kenya, although perhaps they've got other languages as well.
Yeah,
I'm not sure at Kampala, where Nassif's watching from, is in Kenya. I think Kampala's perhaps somewhere else. But anyway, looking for Phil, I do have to discuss a story. Kampala's in Uganda, I believe. But I do have a story to discuss from France. So let's see if we can butcher some more pronunciations here.
This must be a language you're more comfortable with, no?
No, but I have seen Emily 8 or 10 times, so that's
right. That will help.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, France. So big talking point this week because, as we know, online casino is currently illegal in France, even though sports betting and other verticals are legal. But there might be some movement to try and change that at long last. And Connor, you've written very helpfully a 5 things we know about France's move to legalise online casino. So I guess my next question is what are those 5 things?
Well, if you're lucky, you might even get more than 5 things. There's quite a few talking points here. I think the news broke earlier this week about this new bill that was introduced in France's National Assembly, as they call their parliament, I believe. That was put forward by one of their politicians called Philippe Laton. And yes, as you mentioned, so France, of course, the birthplace of roulette. It's home to more than 200 land-based casinos. It has online poker, online horse racing betting, online sports betting, retail betting. It is no stranger to the gambling industry. However, somehow they've managed to go all this time without legalizing online casino. And now looks like it might be the time to do it. So first off, what is the timeline for that? According to the bill, we are looking at a regulated market launch in 2025, but that would be strictly limited to French companies, to local operators only. Indeed, they would be subject to a 5-year moratorium, as they call it, which would see international operators allowed to join the market as early as 2030. So there you go, Jack. That's just one example of that ruthless French efficiency that we're always talking about. Those guys know how to get things done. So yes, 2030, we could have a fully regulated and open online casino market in France, which would be terribly exciting, I'm sure. Obviously, it's a big market, and lots of spending power and disposable income among the French and so on. But the second question is, what would the tax rate be like? What kind of operating environment would it create for gambling businesses? Now, Regulus Partners did some really nice commentary on this story in one of their notes that they sent out earlier this week. And they suggested that a tax rate of 50% or more of GGR is almost guaranteed. That's based on the tax rates for other areas of the gambling sector. So, for example, in land-based casinos, slots are taxed at 83.5% of GGR. So it seems like it's almost pointless even bothering to operate them. Retail betting is taxed at 44.5% of GGR. Online racing betting, 37.5%, and online sports betting, 55.2% tax. That's 55.2% of GGR. So, The operators in New York think they've got it tough with the 40, what was it, 51, 49, 50-ish%? No, in France, it's even worse. So there you go. It's obviously going to be pretty high taxes in France.
Yeah, you'd think so.
That's another of the talking points from that article. The other question is how the kind of market access would work. Would it be a kind of skins-based system as we've seen in US states where online operators kind of partner up with land-based casinos and do it that way? It looks like it might be. Currently, there are 15 groups and 29 independent operators of land-based casinos. So that's 44, if my maths are right, operators, which would make for, a pretty competitive market anyway. But we'll see what happens in terms of online betting or online poker companies being able to kind of partner up with those or access the market in some way. We're not sure exactly what the licensing and market access regime will look like yet. But one thing we do know is that online casino will not be overseen by the ANJ, which currently oversees online poker, online betting. It will be overseen by the Société de Fourniture et de Maintenance, or as we say in Yorkshire, the Sociétés de Furniture and de Maintenance, the SFM, which is, of course, the land-based casino regulator in France. They seem to be pretty highly involved in the way the land-based sector works. So as it happens in France, any purchases of gaming machines and equipment, so slot machines and the like, must go through that regulator. So it's like kind of manages the industry in a very granular way. And the commentary was that by letting them oversee online casino, they'll be able to kind of have this whole market view of both the online and land-based casino sectors.
Yeah, which makes sense if you think, especially in the beginning, it's going to be those land-based guys probably looking to launch online operations in the absence of any international operators. But as you said, Connor, obviously no online casino regulation at the moment means that there's a pretty significant black market, which I think Regular said is worth about 2 billion euros at the moment. But they also said that it probably wouldn't be that challenging to actually channel people into the regulated market when it does launch, because French customers don't really have any strong local brands to hold their hats on. Payment options kind of aren't very good. Sometimes a second-rate user experience. So if if a regulated company can come in and do any of those things well, then there's probably a pretty good opportunity for them here.
Not only that, Regulus also suggested that with the cross-sell opportunities that they create between online, I suppose both between land-based and online casino, but also between online betting and online casino, they suggested that that 2 billion figure could quite easily double within a few years, and we'll be looking at a 4 billion euro a year industry, which would eclipse somewhat the existing industries. So I think the land-based casino sector is worth about 2 billion a year, and the online betting sector is about 2.5. So Regular seems to suggest that online casino could be worth almost as much as both of those combined. And the final point is that for France's government and public purse, that is a bit of a no-brainer, really, because you're not transferring money from one place to another. It's all net gain when it comes to tax revenue. It's simply money that's currently leaving the country to offshore operators. So there you go. No brainer.
You can you can scan the QR code to read Connor's full write-up in all its glory. But there's two things that sort of come into my mind when thinking about France. The first is that what an opportunity this could be for Kindred Group, because they're obviously in France already. Unibet's a massive sports betting brand there. They've got Crosssell Opportunity, everything else. But They don't have any leadership at the moment, and they could be sold. So that's likely to be a missed opportunity. Not that it would be happening anytime soon, I suppose, is the silver lining there. But the other thing I think we're extremely likely to see if this does go through, Connor, and again, it will depend on how favourable the regime actually is. But I think it's pretty likely to trigger M&A, so that international operators can kind of fast track their entry into the French casino market. We saw this in the Netherlands, didn't we, where kind of only domestic operators got a license for online gambling to begin with. I think Kindred was like the first overseas operator to get a license, but we saw the likes of Entain and other companies enter the market through M&A. They bought BetCity, obviously, which just fast tracked the entrance and got them a credible market in the brand to begin with. So I think we could see a similar thing in France if this goes through. Although if the kind of market access works out as you've predicted, that might not be necessary after all.
Yeah, I think the other thing is how likely are French casino operators to want to acquire the kind of tech stacks that they would need to launch on a proprietary basis into the market. I think as we've seen in the US, there's a lot of rush for these operators to try and do things on their own terms and get their own tech stacks. So we never know who might be a target for that.
Yeah, good point. Well made. And I mentioned Entain just at the end there and their acquisition of BetCity, but they're actually the subject of our third and potentially final story today, Connor. They've been back in the news this week, which we'll come to over their former Turkish business. But again, just to give our listeners and viewers some background, if they're not familiar on this topic, this relates to an investigation into Entain, although it was actually known as GVC Holdings then, by HMRC, which is sort of the UK's tax authority. And they are looking into the company's former online business in Turkey and potential former third-party payment suppliers. And this was announced a few years ago now, and it shocked investors, to tell you the truth. I think the share price dropped 11%. We know Turkey is quite a murky territory in terms of gambling laws and regulation. And I think certainly regulators in the US were very concerned about Turkey when they were thinking of pushing BetMGM into US states. But what made this all the more interesting was that the news of the HMRC investigation broke just 1 week after Kenny Alexander had left the business, and he was their long-serving chief executive for a long time, like from when it was Sportingbet and bwin, and he saw the formation of GVC Holdings and turn them into a kind of multi-billion, multi-market operator. But the fact those two things happened so close together caused quite a lot of speculation in the industry at the time. And I remember there was no real answer to why they were being investigated. Even GVC itself said they were a bit annoyed that there was no scope as to the topic of the investigation. And I think I even submitted a freedom of information request to HMRC maybe a year or two later, as we hadn't received any updates, but they got back to me and just said, because the case is still ongoing, we can't provide you with any information. So it went quiet for a little while. Kenny Alexander kept busy in the meantime, it's fair to say. He was one of my favourite gambling chief executives when covering the industry, because he was definitely old school, to say the least. He'd have sort of a laugh and joke with investors on analyst calls and stuff. Loves racehorses, is an incredibly successful racehorse owner now. But also, he's a little bit wild when it comes to having a few beers, by the sounds of it. And we've got the screenshot to show you now, which is one of the most surprising stories from around the industry. So basically, he won't. He won't thank me for shedding light on this at all. But he basically went out for a few drinks one night in Scotland, ended up in a kebab shop, and stole a Uber driver's car to drive home in, which is behaviour that we absolutely cannot condone in any way, shape, or form, and resulted in a £1,000 fine and a ban from driving for a year. Thanks, Elizabeth. But what I would say is you can't really imagine any gambling chief executives doing anything like that in the market today. They're so sort of polished and careful. So yeah, blast from the past, but the past is probably where that kind of behaviour should stay. But Connor, that was a long-winded and rambling way of saying that this case is back in the news this week. Do you want to kind of explain why it's come to our attention once again?
Yes. So Entain have put out a statement about all this, suggesting that it will likely be hit with a substantial financial penalty following a probe by HMRC and the Crown Prosecution Service. So I think one of the key things about this to note is that it is indeed, we're talking about the Crown Prosecution Service here. We're talking about investigations into criminal activity. It's not just a breach of gambling regulations or anything like that. We're talking about a charge of breaking the Bribery Act. So there's charges of bribery here, obviously very, very serious. But Entain, yes, has come out this week and said it's expecting essentially a substantial financial penalty. There have been other suggestions that prosecutions may also take place here, although against whom we're not exactly sure. But at the moment, it's in deferred prosecution agreement talks, DPA talks with the Crown Prosecution Service. These are voluntary agreements where the company can disclose its misgivings or criminal activities, whatever you want to call them, in order to avoid criminal prosecution in exchange for full disclosure, financial penalties, and remedial measures. So it wants to try and make sure that nobody gets any criminal convictions out of this. They've cleaned up their act since then. That's the line, and they're willing to pay a substantial financial penalty. It'll be interesting to see how that shapes up against Gambling Commission issued fines. I suspect it might be substantially larger, but we will see. So, for example, anyway, talking about how they've cleaned up their act, their chairman, Barry Gibson, has said, "We are keen to achieve a resolution to what is a historical issue relating principally to a business that was sold by the group nearly 6 years ago," so distancing itself from the alleged crimes there. He said, "Entain has been through a period of extraordinary transformation since then and has taken decisive action to be a best-in-class, responsible operator with outstanding corporate governance. The board and leadership teams have been overhauled. 100% of our revenue is now from regulated or regulating markets, and our business model, strategy, and culture have been reviewed, analysed, and stress tested." So the only thing he left out there, I suppose, was, "We're ever so sorry. It was all in the past, and we're ever so sorry." So, that's kind of where we are at the moment. Still quite unclear. Still quite unclear exactly what's going to happen. Nobody quite knows, but that's the latest. Entain expecting substantial penalty.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Thank you very much, Connor. And I think when this story first came out all those years ago, we thought it was just about their third-party payments provider, but it's now very clear that it includes Entain as well. So yeah, one to keep an eye on. We'll obviously bring you all the headlines on this as they happen. I think Lars makes a request in the chat there. He says, "I'd like to request an iGaming in Asia special, as it's an increasingly important market." And I think maybe that's something we can look to do on weekly news in future weeks. Maybe on a quiet news week, for example, we can put a poll or a request out there on LinkedIn, and to see what you guys would like us to discuss, and then maybe some of you could even join us as special guests, because we've said 100 times, haven't we, Connor, that it's kind of the audience participation that makes this a great show for us to produce. So yeah, keep your suggestions coming in. I'll have a talk with the guys off air, and we'll see what we can come up with. But yeah, thanks for commenting, and thanks for all your support throughout. Connor, do you want to say a quick thanks to our sponsors before we say goodbye today?
Of course, yes. Brought to you by Playson. None of this would be possible without them. So eternally, we are grateful to Playson, who also choose the best and funkiest theme music for their adverts. So props to them. And also, of course, to Interactive and Hub 88, who are our loyal supporters in this weekly news endeavour as well. So thanks to all of them. And as you say, Jake, thanks to the audience who absolutely make this show what it is and make it such a pleasure to come on and say hello every week.
Yeah, Phil says they're top 50 iGaming memes, and that's an idea with Pierre's name all over it. I think he's an online meme lord, if ever there was one. As I said at the top, tickets are still for sale for Valletta, so please do buy one. It would be awesome to see some of you in person. But for now, that's quite a short and sweet one from us this week with no Nico there. I don't know if the two are related. You guys can be the judge of that. Connor, you've been brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'll see you at the same time next week. Thanks, everybody.
Pleasure as always. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Gaming Festival Week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The iGaming Festival Week.